Pushing Back the Shadows, support and awareness for mental health. Hello and welcome to episode 15 of the Pushing Back the Shadows podcast. My name is Alex Davis, I'm the founder of Pushing Back the Shadows. So just at the start of this episode, I wanted to say it's great to have you on board. I was thinking as I was coming up with the plan for this week's episode, 15 episodes. Okay, we've been releasing them every fortnight up until very recently, but 15 episodes is quite a lot to me, and we wouldn't have been able to keep going without the support that we have from you guys, our listeners, and also the people over at Patreon, our patrons who contribute so that we can keep going, meeting our running costs and purchasing equipment like the microphone that I'm using. So we really do appreciate the support that we get from you guys. Alrighty though, let's have a look at today's episode. So I wanted to look at relapsing. It's something that has been coming up a lot over the past couple of weeks among some of the people I talk to. Something that they find is an ongoing problem. You know, sometimes it feels like you're getting better, you're putting everything back in place, things are going alright, and then crash. Something happens, and you just go back to square one. It's something that might be more noticeable with things like self-harm. It's something that one of my friends has been struggling with, and they told me the other day that for whatever reason they'd spiraled and they'd gone straight back to that stage. And I'll be honest, it's something that I've struggled with too. I have frequently gone back to that stage. I've lost count now of the number of scars that I'd have from it. Nowhere that anybody would really see, but there are quite a few. I have a tendency to go over them. But so relapses can be quite common. And even in things not mental health related, but in physical health, you can have a relapse. You can be going through rehabilitation therapy, and you get to a certain point, and then it starts to feel a little like you're going 2 steps forward, 1 step back. You have those relapses. And sometimes we find that we don't know how to deal with relapsing. It's difficult, isn't it? We don't sometimes know what to do with it, how to cope with it. We have a tendency to beat ourselves up. Oh, I should be better than this. I shouldn't be going backwards. I'm getting better. I shouldn't be doing this. And we take it out on ourselves, and if anything, it can sometimes make it feel worse. It's bad enough that we've slipped back. It's bad enough that we've got to that stage again. But we've gone backwards a bit. And we don't quite know how to deal with that. Now, I don't know whether this is something that you can relate to. Have you had times during your walk with your mental health where things have been improving and then they've suddenly slipped backwards? They've gone straight back to, not necessarily to where you started, but they've certainly gone back a good couple of steps. It's something that we do find happens a fair bit. There are people who say, oh, I was getting better, but now I'm not. And as I mentioned earlier, my friend's been there, I've been there. It's something that is quite common. So just think for a moment about your story and times that maybe you've relapsed, times you've gone backwards. How did you feel? What did you do? How did you cope with it? Now, everybody has different coping mechanisms. There are different things that they will do to cope with that relapse, and I suppose a lot of it does depend on what kind of things you do, what kind of person you are. For some people it would be, oh no, I've relapsed, and they would go and bury their heads in the sand. They'd do whatever they could to forget about it. Other people would choose to take it out on themselves. I know one person who, when they've self-harmed, when they feel like they've relapsed into self-harm, 9 times out of 10 they will go straight back and do it again not long after, because they just use that as ammunition to beat themselves up. And then there are some people who relapse and just go, yeah, alright, fine, I've taken a few steps back, but I'm still going to move forwards. It's interesting, really, that some people would consider that last approach to be a position of strength, and some people would consider the first bit, the burying the head in the sand, to be more of a position of weakness. But personally, I don't think that strength and weakness really come into it that much. But back to my original question, how do we deal with relapse? Let's take a look, shall we? Enable Pushing Back the Shadows to continue supporting people in the mental health community, their friends and their family. By pledging just $1 a month, you could help us to continue supporting people with depression, with anxiety, with bipolar and other mental illnesses. You can also unlock exclusive rewards, behind the scenes, sneak previews of upcoming posts and much, much more. So head over to www.patreon.com/Alex Davis PBTS to find out more. So let's put a bit of context into this. I'd like to tell you a little bit about one of my relapses, because there's certainly been a couple of them. So this is going back a good number of months. I'm not sure exactly how many. Potentially somewhere in the region of four months, maybe 5. And I can't really remember what happened. It was surrounding a conversation, I think. Could have been an argument. I'm not sure which. But for some reason, my mood just plummeted. It hit rock bottom, kind of almost the lowest that it's been at that point, that it had been for a good 4 to 6 weeks at least. I mean, at that point things were looking up. I was on the mend. My antidepressants were working. I was in a better place. And okay, while there had still been a couple of episodes of self-harm, they hadn't been nearly as bad as some of the ones that had come before. But as I say, this particular thing, and I don't know whether it was the conversation, whether it was who I was talking to, or whether it was a combination of different things that had gone on throughout the day. I really honestly couldn't tell you. But whatever it was that sparked it off, it sent me into a downward spiral. And as happens with the really bad spirals, I found myself back in the bathroom with a blade in hand, doing that lovely little magic trick where you take some silver and you turn it into red, and suddenly the problems start to vanish. Now, as I'd said in one of the podcast episodes I'd done about self-harm, and also on the website, I know it doesn't solve the problems. The problems are still there when you come out of the effect that the self-harming has. But it did help. Now, one thing that me and my friend always talk about when we talk about self-harm is that whenever she does it, she's always like she's really trying to take it out on herself. You know, the wounds kind of crisscross each other. Some are short, some are long, some are randomly deep, and there's no pattern to it. There's no order to it. Me, on the other hand, they're very ordered. I will do it in kind of lines. So it will be parallel lines running in the same direction, usually the same kind of length, same kind of depth, that sort of thing. And there always seems to be something with me that I count them. I'm not sure why, because I do tend to keep a running total. Whether it's part of how I cope with it or not, I don't really know. But I do seem to keep a running total. And I remember on this particular night that I'd hit either my highest or my second highest total that I'd ever done. I believe it was 75 cuts in one sitting, which for me is a lot. It might not sound like a lot to some people, or it might sound like loads to somebody else, but for me, at that point, it was a lot. And I remember sitting there and I was saying, do you know what, I don't know how to deal with this. I don't know how to deal with this. I was getting better, now I'm not getting better, I've gone back to where I started, and it was one of those things that could have just tipped me right back to the beginning. It could have really tipped me back to the beginning. So what did I do? How did I cope with that? What way is there for you to deal with a relapse and realise that actually, do you know what? It's alright to have that relapse. Let me tell you a little bit about what I did, how I coped, and what my stance on relapse is. And while I'm telling you about that, have a think about some of the times that you might feel that you've relapsed. Have a think about how you coped with it. And if you fancy, do drop me a message. Let me know how you coped with it, how you felt, what happened, if you want to. I'd be very interested to hear the stories, because some people cope with it in different ways. The good news is that our Twitter is working again, so you can tweet me directly or message me if you prefer. The technical issues have been resolved, but do get in touch. Let's have a look at my view on relapse. You're listening to Pushing Back the Shadows. So how do we deal with the relapse? What do we do? Realistically, relapses are okay. They're to be expected. Part of recovering from any medical condition, there is the chance that you will have a relapse. It's not always going to be plain sailing. Recovery is not just a smooth upward slope. Sometimes it is rocky. Sometimes it does dip. And yes, okay, sometimes the dips are quite sharp. You do go back, say, 5 or 6 steps instead of just 2. But you are in recovery, and that's okay. Think about it this way: when you're learning something new, whether that's at school, learning maths, or whether you're learning to drive, whatever you're learning, you will make mistakes. Because you're learning, you won't get it perfectly right every single time. And it's the same with recovery. You won't recover fully, immediately, perfectly the first time. You are likely to experience some kind of relapse, whether a big one, whether a small one. So it can feel like a failure. It really can. We feel like we're not doing what we're supposed to be, that we're not getting to where we should be. But realistically, it's not a failure. It's okay. It's part of the natural recovery. And part of it is that you're trying. Particularly with mental health, you are trying to get better. And that in itself is why it's a relapse. Because without the attempt at recovery, you cannot have the relapse. Your case can worsen, absolutely, but it doesn't count as a relapse unless you've started getting better. Unless your condition is moving upwards, you cannot move backwards. So, part of dealing with a relapse is what you do with it. For some, it could be an excuse to go, do you know what, I can't do this, and throw the towel in. For others, it'll be a case of, okay, it's happened, I'll move on. Now, one of my favourite quotes, and I seem to have a lot of favourite quotes, but one of my favourite quotes comes from Batman Begins, Christopher Nolan's film in 2005. And Batman's father, when Batman's a child, turns around and says, "Why do we fall, Bruce? So we can learn to pick ourselves up." And that is a relapse. It's an opportunity to learn to pick ourselves back up. Part of a relapse for me is another way of looking at how good I was, looking at it and saying, well, okay, I have recovered to a certain extent. Yes, I've gone back a bit, but I've done it once. I can do it again. And it's just shifting that mindset ever so slightly so that it's not so much of a failure as it is a minor setback or a temporary setback. Falling is absolutely fine, providing you don't stay there. As long as you keep trying to move forwards, you are doing the right thing. And even if you do relapse, it doesn't mean that you can't recover. Doesn't mean that you'll never get there. It may take a long time, but you can get there. And it's good. It's really good. So if you're experiencing a relapse at the moment, or alternatively, if you know of somebody who is, or even if you've experienced a relapse recently, keep holding on. Keep fighting. Keep stepping forwards. Because you will get better. Remember, it's not a permanent place of residence. It is a temporary setback. And you will get through it. Why do we fall? So we can learn to pick ourselves up. Thank you ever so much for tuning in to this episode. If you want to read on a little more about what I say about relapse, then there will be a link in the description to a post that I've written about relapsing. And if you have any questions, do get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. But thank you very much. You guys take care. Have a good day. You've been listening to Pushing Back the Shadows. To find out more, head over to pushingbacktheshadows.com and hit subscribe to get all of our latest updates straight to your inbox. Alternatively, connect with us on Facebook, which is facebook.com/AlexDavisPBTS, or you can visit us on Twitter at AlexDavisPBTS. Enable Pushing Back the Shadows to continue supporting people in the mental health community, their friends and their family. By pledging just $1 a month, you could help us to continue supporting people with depression, with anxiety, with bipolar and other mental illnesses. You can also unlock exclusive rewards, behind the scenes, sneak previews of upcoming posts and much, much more. So head over to www.patreon.com/AlexDavisPBTS to find out more.